I take this opportunity to introduce our guest of honor, Professor Dr. Rajni Abbi, Faculty of Law, Delhi University. Professor Dr. Rajni Abbi has a vast academic and research experience of almost 30 years. She was a gold medalist both in her LLB and LLM. Professor Abbi has been a member of the Proctorial Board of Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University and a member of the Academic Council of the Delhi University. She also held various offices, which include the following: Member of Municipal Corporation of Delhi from 2007 to 2012, Deputy Chairperson Standing Committee, Municipal Corporation of Delhi from 2010 to 2011, Mayor of Delhi from 2011 to 2012, Member of North Delhi Municipal Corporation from 2012 to the present date. Her teaching and research interests include commercial and consumer laws. In her flourishing academic career, she has taught a wide array of subjects such as contract law, company law, business regulation, commercial transactions, corporate management, competition law, law of evidence, business laws, etc. She is a visiting professor at the Beijing Institute of Technology, Beijing, China, and the Nanjing University of Aeronautics and Astronautics, Nanjing, China. Professor Abbi has also authored many textbooks and reference books in the area of business law and corporate law. Ma'am, we are honored by your presence here. I request you to kindly deliver the keynote address.
Thank you so much, Soumya. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Sandeep Shastri, the Vice Chancellor of Jharkhand Lake City University. I also want to thank Professor Yogendra Srivastav, Dr. Ankit Singh for inviting me for this valedictory session. And I would also like to invite and thank Dr. K.D. Singh. Dr. K.D. Singh is very dear to my heart, not only because he's been my colleague also, at one point of time he was my student also, but as today is Father's Day and everybody realizes that parents and teachers are most happy when their students and their children go forward and make a name for themselves. I think that is the happiest moment in anybody's life. So I'm so glad Dr. K.D. Singh is also here. This two-day virtual national conference which you're having on the changing paradigm of corporate and competition laws, I did not attend the sessions. I thought probably that one of your students was going to give a conference report, but and I would know about it, but I think probably that has changed or something.
Just a second, ma'am. Just a second, ma'am. Ma'am, the report is going to come at the final stage after all the
okay.
No
okay. Thank you, Ankit.
We made a last-minute plan, ma'am. No
okay. Dr. Shastri mentioned about paradigm shift. Whenever there is a paradigm shift in any area, we have to see why this shift has come. And in law, this shift is very eminent and it comes quite often because law is a very dynamic area. As and when the requirements change, these shifts come. And as he mentioned about our Prime Minister's address to the nation, I must remind the gathering also that since the time this government has come, it has actually tried to make the system clear in the sense that around more than 2 lakh companies were delisted because they were fake companies, they were not doing any business. And this was a very healthy sign that the government is not going to take any nonsense from all these companies which were fake companies doing no business at all. Today, I'm going to talk a little about the paradigm shift in the corporate governance in this country, how this has happened, how the new act of the Companies Act 2013 has brought in many new things, which has brought about, you can say, a kind of a cleansing, which was very well needed. Now, if we go back to history and we see that if we see 17th and 18th century and we see the British law, at that time, when these body corporates were made, they were registered under the Royal Charter or some special acts of parliament, which were very expensive and very dilatory. And for that matter, because they were very expensive, there were many illegal kind of partnerships which started mushrooming. So, and the management was in the hands of a few people who used to divert public funds. So, in as long as 1720, the first act which was passed was the Bubbles Act, and that uh, wanted to rectify the situation, but instead of rectifying, I think it promoted more bubble companies to come up. So in 1825, that act was repealed. For the first time in 1844, the first act to register and incorporate uh, large partnerships was passed in England. And in 1849, the Joint Stock Companies Act was passed. And then rest is history. There have been so many amendments, so many other acts which have come. If we come to India, the first Joint Stock Companies Act was passed in 1850, but the Consolidated Act, the Companies Act, was in 1956, which was passed, which was a very exhaustive act. But over the period, there were a lot of amendments and there were a lot of moves to change the act. And finally, in the year 2013, the new Companies Act came into being. Now, corporate governance, the term itself, if you see, that has come a long way since 1956 to the present date. Now, it has gained a lot of importance since the liberalization, globalization, and it has gained a lot of importance since the emergence of multinational companies. Now, it was highlighted, corporate governance and the need for corporate governance was highlighted after a lot of frauds and scams. I hope the country has not forgotten the Harshad Mehta scam, the Ketan Parekh scam, the Satyam scam, the Sahara scam, the Enron scam, and the WorldCom scam. So all these scams led that the corporate governance must be perfectly fine so that the public money which is in the hands of these companies, it is not misused. Now, these frauds, if we see these scams and frauds, there were a lot of reasons why these scams were there, and there were a lot of loopholes also. Some of them being there were loopholes in external audits. If you see Satyam scam, if you see their books of accounts, they were inflated to such an extent that the whole world was thinking that Satyam is such a big company and it is flourishing so well, but it was all fudged up. So these external audits, unfettered powers in the hands of the CEOs, lack of transparency, inadequate regulatory mechanism, and many a times overrating of the rating agencies also. So all these led to these gaps. Now, what is this corporate governance? Corporate governance, if you see, it means that a company manages to do its business in a manner that is accountable and responsible to the shareholders, and not only the shareholders, all the other stakeholders also. They could be employees, they could be suppliers, they could be customers, they could be local community, etc. So corporate uh, governance is very important. Now, if you see the definition of corporate governance, it has been given by one of the Nobel laureates, Milton Friedman, and he gave a lot of importance on structure of the company, running and earning by the corporation, right? But this has been now widened across the globe. And the stringent rules and regulations for structure, function, and company vis-a-vis ensuring protection of stakeholders and society in large in form of corporate social responsibility. I'll come to corporate social responsibility in the last part. Now, what is the need or importance of corporate governance? The corporate governance can be seen to fulfill the following needs. Firstly, it provides for the separation of the ownership and control. There is a separation between the ownership and the control. Secondly, it resolves problems stemming from the separation of ownership and control. Thirdly, it increases efficiency. It maintains corporate culture and model code of conduct and business ethics in the corporate world. And lastly, It also prevents the purpose which I said, scams and frauds, by maintaining checks and balances. What are the benefits of corporate governance if you see? The first benefit of corporate governance is the stability and sustainability for investors. Now, why do people invest in companies? Because they want, they see the stability, they see the fundamentals of the company, and therefore to build confidence among the stakeholders. Secondly, the growth and stability of the companies. Third is the acquisition and retention of talent, which is very important. All good governed enterprises attract and retain well qualified, hardworking, honest, ambitious, and competent people. It also reduces risks management and corruption, because if it is effective governance, then all these things, risks will be reduced. It also provides a good reputation and recognition to the company. And lastly, but not the least, there is a higher firm valuation of the uh, corporate corporation. Now, there are certain three theories of corporate governance which we can talk about. The first is the agency theory. The concept of separation and ownership and control is the pivot of this theory. So managers or agents run the company on behalf of the shareholders. The second is the stewardship theory. The theory was propounded by Davis, Shurman, and Donaldson. They argued that the managers are trustworthy and not prone to misappropriate investor funds. And the last is the stakeholder theory. In this theory, this is a reverse from the above two theories, and it operationalizes the corporate governance by empowerment of the stakeholders, like the board of shareholders, employees, banks, suppliers, creditors, government, etc. We have certain models of corporate governance also. I'm not going to go into detail. We have the Anglo-Saxon model, the German model, the Japanese model, the family-based model, etc. A lot of models. But if you see the history and how did it all these reforms start? After independence, if we see, the government of India appointed Sri Bhabha Committee to consider all business laws and make an integrated, comprehensive law. And the recommendations of the committee led to the enactment of 1956 Companies Act. Later on, to resolve the anomalies of the Companies Act 1956, the government appointed Justice A.V. Vishwanath Shastri Committee in 1957, which led to the Companies Amendment Act 1960. Then we had company fraud actually emerged, the Dalmia Jain combined, and at that time, Tendulkar Ghosh Commission of Inquiry was appointed. It revealed a lot of irregularities at the managerial level. And then 1965 amendments were there. Then after the globalization of economy, in 1991, the SEBI Act of 1992 was passed, and a lot of rules came into existence. The Sachar Committee and the Iradi Committee were appointed in 1988 and 2002, and they also gave their recommendations. Then we had the Dr. J.J. Irani Committee, which submitted its report in 2005. And these all modifications led to the generation of a need for a new company law. And to fulfill this, the Companies Bill 2009 was introduced, and finally it got the assent on 29th August 2013. Now, besides this, we have a lot of other committees also. We have the SEBI's Kumar Mangalam Birla Committee, Clause 49. Then we have the Naresh Chandra Committee report, SEBI's Narayan Murthy Committee report. Then we have the Corporate Governance Voluntary Guidelines of 2009. Then we have the Guidelines on Corporate Governance for Central Public Sector Enterprises 2010. So a lot of key changes were introduced in the Act. Now, what are these key changes which were brought in by the recommendations of all these acts, all these committees? I straight away come to that because I know we have limited time. Now, some of the character or key changes, we have the now the annual returns under the Companies Act 2010 13, which have to be filed for companies having paid up share capital of 5 crores or a turnover of 25 crores. Then we have place of keeping registers and returns. Then the 2013 Act also stated the first annual general meeting should be held within 9 months from the date of closing of the first financial year. Then regarding board composition, that's the most important thing. There were a lot of new things which were introduced. The number of directors, of course, there was a change. One person company which will have one director, then other companies. But there were certain categories of directors which were included. One was the resident director. The Act 2013 introduces the requirement of appointing a resident director, a person who has stayed in India for a total period of not less than 182 days. The most important factor was the introduction of independent directors. Section 149, Clause 4 of the Act required that every listed company shall have at least 1/3 of the total number of directors as independent directors, and the central government may provide minimum numbers also. Then there were certain qualifications which were added, that he should be an independent person, a person of integrity, expertise, etc. Now, appointing an independent director seems to be a very easy thing and a very difficult thing also. Because easy, it seems that he should not be related, but to find such a person and a person who remains independent after being on the board of directors is a very difficult thing. Because what happens is, once you appoint an independent director, subsequently there are groups which are pulling him here and there, and how much, how long can he remain independent is very important. Then they fixed liability of independent directors also. Another thing which was introduced was the women directors, which were in listed companies other than public companies. They have to have at least one woman director, right? Now, besides these directors, there were certain boards which were established by the Act. One is the audit committee. So there were committees which were there. First is the audit committee. Section 177 provides for an audit committee. Then we have a nomination and a remuneration committee under this Act. Then we have a stakeholders relationship committee. If you remember, when we used to earlier teach minor shareholders, majority shareholders, oppression and mismanagement, etc. To solve all those kinds of problems, we have a stakeholders relationship committee also. And most important, we have a corporate social responsibility committee also, right? Now, these were some of the things which were incorporated in the Act. And besides this, a very important feature which found, it was already there, but it found a prominent place, was the introduction of the corporate social responsibility. Section 135 of the Act talks about that. And we all know the provisions, of course, what all companies require to do corporate social responsibility. Now, this concept of corporate social responsibility has always been in our ethos. If you see, there were so many temples, so many hospitals, so many educational institutions made by Tatas, Birlas, Ambanis, so many people. But the earlier, the feature was that they were philanthropic. It was their wish, they wanted to do it, whatever they wanted to do it, and in whatever area or field they wanted to do it. But now the Act has made it mandatory, and there is a schedule which is attached which tells us in what areas can we spend that corporate social responsibility. Although there were a lot of complaints regarding that also. I actually know of many NGOs who are only in this job that they give certificates to companies who are spending less, and they're giving a certificate of more. There was also a complaint of a tire company whereby the rejected tires, or the tires which were not up to the mark, they were giving those tires in corporate social responsibility, and the court had to stop that this will not amount to corporate social responsibility. And the latest thing after this pandemic, now any work which is done by the corporates in the area of controlling the pandemic or helping making oxygen cylinders or all these kinds of things, even that would be included in corporate social responsibility. As my introduction was being given, I have been related and have been in the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. And I have given these suggestions, some of the suggestions to the Ministry of Company Affairs also, that all these municipal corporations and panchayats all over the country, they have always suffered from lack of funds. They've had very less funds. So any work which is assigned to them, if that is also taken up by any corporate sector, that should also be included. In fact, in the most common thing which the companies do is education and health sector, but that should also be included. These are some of the, as I said, paradigm shift in the corporate law, because corporate governance now, it was a misnomer. It was a term which was not properly used, and companies were doing a lot of wrong things. So therefore, the government has had to pass these strictures, these laws, and now they are being implemented also. And now there is a reporting also on corporate social responsibility, that how much have you spent, and if you have not spent, it can be spent in the next year also, but you have to give an explanation for it. I think I have taken more than the time which was allocated to me. Thank you very much for taking me and listening to me.